Hi, and welcome to this live reading from My Goodbye Girl by Anna Gomez, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. The day she met him, Tessa was second in the priority lane for the Boeing 777 bound for LaGuardia from Boston. He was third. After boarding the plane, Tessa found her place, 7C, then hopped on the aisle seat to place her bags in the storage space above. She quickly tucked her purse far into the corner to prevent it from being smashed by the larger carry-ons, completely unaware she was holding up the line. "I think this is me," said a man as he pointed his boarding pass toward her heavy black boots squashing the edge of his seat. It took her a few seconds to decipher his words. He had a heavy accent, certainly foreign. British, she decided. He had a distinct lilt to his tone. "Oh, I am so sorry," Tessa exclaimed, hopping off and backing into another passenger who had tried to squeeze past them. She shrugged and smiled in embarrassment before brushing her hand over his chair. She scampered across the middle seat and settled in next to the window. Before she could turn back to address the man, an elderly gentleman sat beside her with a glass of orange juice in one hand and a torn-up paperback in the other. Tessa couldn't help her curiosity. She wanted a better look at the man who sat by the aisle. He didn't fit the mold of the typical businessman who normally took this midday flight. If only her view wasn't blocked by the man who separated them. Without turning her head, she tried her best to assess him. Long, lean legs, jeans, and vintage Converse sneakers. Through the corner of her eye, she strained to see his face. He had just put on some reading glasses. She noted his sandy brown hair, side-swept and thicker on top, dense eyebrows, and prominent nose. It was also the only thing she could see past the older man, who had now removed his shoes. When the guy in 7A stood up to retrieve something from the overhead compartment, Tessa noticed some serious abs hiding under his shirt. The way he leaned back in his seat, the way his fingers leafed through a pile of papers. He looked like an intellectual dressed as a cool dude. Tessa was a writer, a keen observer of people, events, and places. She was obsessed with stories and lived and breathed with a passionate imagination, always finding love in the daily trivialities of life. The characters in her books were a combination of the stories she made up about the people she'd met, muddled with memories that had turned themselves into fiction. Her inspirations started out as feelings and emotions. In time, they would blossom into words that seized control of every waking moment. She began to write on the back of her boarding pass. Hot guy on the aisle seat meets girl on plane to where? Leaves keychain on seat. He searches for her everywhere. Write about that journey. Elderly gentleman. Mentor? Cupid? Gosh, she's cute. The whirlwind of book signings and fan functions left her exhausted. This was all new to her, and the past year had been too hectic. New York was the last stop in this year's spring tour. Smile, laugh, get your A game on. But the satisfaction of seeing her words come to life in the hearts and minds of complete strangers kept her going. There was nothing better than meeting new people from all walks of life and from every place in the world. People who shared your feelings and understood your messages, who ceased to be strangers and turned into friends. "You say you hate it, but you do it every single time," her best friend had said. Riley had flowing black hair, flawless olive skin, and perfect makeup. The same Riley who had the heart of Tessa's older brother, Jacob, wrapped around her finger. "I know," Tessa had said while sitting on a bench outside the Soul Cycle on Wacker Drive just 2 weeks before. "My agent insists I do at least 4 events this year. It's all so unexpected. I don't think we know how to deal with it yet." "What, hitting the bestseller list?" Tessa had nodded. "I think she's in shock and wants to make sure I take full advantage of it. You know, it gets lonely sometimes. There's no one to share these interesting times with," Tessa hinted, winking. Riley had cocked her head and placed her finger on her lips. "New York does sound inviting. I'll tell you what. I'll assist you at the signing if you let us extend for 2 more days to attend Fashion Week. I'm sure Gabby will be able to score us some tickets to the McQueen show." And that's how this trip came to be. The rest of the flight was uneventful. The older man coughed incessantly, and Tessa faced away from him. Soon she fell into a deep sleep, periodically interrupted by the forward bobbing of her head. Tessa jolted upright when the plane skidded to a stop. She reached for her phone to turn it on. It began vibrating with message after message. Riley's flight from Los Angeles would be landing in about 2 hours. Tessa would have time to unpack at the hotel and walk around Manhattan before Riley arrived. After a loud ding, passengers began unbuckling their seatbelts all around her. The young man in 7A shot up like an arrow, facing in her direction. For a brief second, she caught his gaze. He smiled at her, a lopsided kind of smile, unsure, maybe even embarrassed. As the aisle began to fill, Tessa stood, leaned on the headrest, and waited for the line to move. All this time, she felt him watching her, the heat of his stare causing her ears to burn. He made small talk with a woman who asked him what he was doing in New York. She overheard the word convention and perked up to listen, but his voice was soon lost amidst the hum of other exchanges. She boldly watched as the interesting man unlatched the overhead bin, removed a black leather bag, and placed it on his seat. And then, to her surprise, he gently handed her bag over. "Thank you," Tessa smiled as she reached for her burgundy purse. "You're welcome," he answered. Then he was gone.